My sweet girl, you came back to me." Her frail voice cracked under the ancient tree, and in that moment everything changed. Welcome to A Love That Grew Under the Old Tree, a story of a beautiful black preschool teacher, a quiet billionaire, and the child who brought them together. But what happens when a woman once rejected by his family becomes the only one his mother remembers? Where are you tuning in from? New York, London, Lagos, Manila? Drop your city in the comments. What do you think? Will love melt a lifetime of prejudice, or will judgment win again? Stay with us until the end, because what happens during that late-night family card game will surprise you. If you love stories of healing, second chances, and unexpected bonds, don't forget to like, comment, share where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss our next emotional journey. Let's dive in. The wind whispered through the oak trees surrounding Sunshine Grove Preschool, carrying with it the faint scent of cinnamon and autumn leaves. Inside Classroom B, soft crayons scratched across construction paper, and the buzz of childhood laughter echoed off the pastel-painted walls. But in the far left corner, beneath the window where sunlight pooled like honey, one child sat alone. Grayson Hale Jr., 5 years old, fair-skinned with a mop of golden curls and solemn green eyes, clutched a navy blue crayon in his small fist. He wasn't coloring. He was drawing circles, endless silent circles. While the other children played kitchen, built towers, and sang along to the alphabet song, Grayson sat still, watching, listening, but never speaking. Celeste Turner had noticed him on her very first day. As the new preschool teacher, she'd entered the room with her signature warm smile and calm presence, her deep brown skin glowing beneath a sunflower yellow blouse, curls pulled neatly into a bun. She had a way of making children feel seen, but Grayson didn't look at her. Not directly. He always tilted his gaze just slightly, as though afraid his eyes might betray him. While most teachers chalked it up to trauma, to shyness, Celeste saw something else. A boy waiting to be invited into the world, and she was determined to extend that invitation. She started small. Every morning she knelt beside his chair, her voice a gentle melody. "Morning, Grayson. I saved you a seat near the reading corner." No response, just a flicker in his lashes. During art time, she handed him a set of watercolors and watched his fingers twitch toward them, then retreat. But she didn't push. When the class learned a new song, she sat next to him and played the chords softly on her ukulele, just loud enough for him to feel the vibration through the floor. Still, he said nothing. No words, no smile. But she caught the way his foot tapped once under the table. Just once. It was Thursday afternoon, nearly 4 weeks into the school year, when something changed. The rain had canceled recess, so Celeste rolled out the rhythm drums. The kids squealed with joy, except for Grayson. He sat rigid, but when she began to play a soft beat, 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 boom, boom, clap, his fingers twitched again. She played slower, then paused. "Can someone keep the beat going for me?" she asked. Tiny hands flew up. Grayson looked down at his desk. Then, without warning, he drifted, toward the center of the circle and picked up a small, wooden drum. He didn't look at anyone, but when she resumed the rhythm, he joined in. Perfect timing, no instruction, just instinct. The room stilled. Even the kids knew something sacred had happened. Celeste didn't say a word. She just smiled and nodded, keeping the beat going, letting him lead. And for the first time, Grayson looked her in the eyes. It was brief. A flash of green against her rich brown gaze, but it was the start. That day, he sat beside her during story time, closer than he'd ever dared. He didn't speak, but when she turned the page, his hand reached out and touched the corner before she could, and she let him turn it as if he had always been part of the story. The following week, Grayson began to draw again. Not circles, but shapes, houses, trees. A small figure that Celeste realized looked suspiciously like her. Curly hair, yellow shirt, and a smile. At lunch, he sat 2 seats closer to the rest of the group. During music time, he held a tambourine. And one magical Wednesday morning, just as she helped another child tie their shoe, she heard it. A whisper, a breath of sound. Miss C. She turned, her heart thudding. Grayson was looking at her, mouth barely parted, eyes wide with fear and hope. "Did you say something, sweetheart?" she asked gently. He nodded, then whispered again, "Miss C, can I draw you again?" That night, Celeste lay awake longer than usual. She thought of his voice, small but clear. She thought of the way his shoulders no longer sagged. Something inside her shifted. She had taught dozens of children. But this connection felt deeper than any classroom bond. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way he clung to her every glance. Maybe it was how fiercely he reminded her of herself. Quiet, unsure, longing to be chosen. She didn't realize that outside of school, a man was watching too. A man who had noticed the change in his son's drawings, the light in his eyes, the way he now hummed softly in the back seat. Nicholas Hale stood near the entrance one Friday, dressed in a sleek navy coat, hands in his pockets, watching through the glass as Grayson gently placed a daisy on Celeste's desk before leaving. "It's for Miss C," he'd told his father earlier that morning. "She's like the mommy." My dreams. Nicholas hadn't known what to say. He hadn't heard his son speak so confidently in over a year. And now, this woman, graceful, gentle woman, had somehow unlocked something in him that therapists, doctors, and tutors could not. Nicholas took a breath and stepped inside. The room smelled like finger paint and applesauce. Celeste looked up, surprised. "Mr. Hale," she greeted. "Is everything all right?" He hesitated. "Yes, Grayson. He's happy. I haven't seen him like this since." His voice trailed off. Celeste nodded. "He's finding his way. You've raised a very special boy." Nicholas studied her face. There was something quietly radiant about her, like sunlight through rain. "I'd like to thank you properly," he said at last. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow evening?" The question hung in the air. She tilted her head slightly, studying him, then smiled. "Dinner sounds nice." And as Nicholas turned to leave, Celeste glanced at the daisy on her desk. Grayson's crayon drawing was still taped beside it. Her, him, and a house with hearts above the roof. She touched the paper gently and whispered, "You're already home." Little did she know that was only the beginning. The restaurant sat quietly on the edge of Lake Michigan, its amber lighting flickering through tall windows that overlooked the still water. Inside, the clinking of wine glasses and the soft hum of a live cello provided an elegant hush to the evening. Celeste stood near the entrance, her soft gray wrap coat clutched at her waist, heart pounding louder than she liked to admit. She wasn't used to this. White tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, and a man like Nicholas Hale waiting with a single white lily in hand. As she walked in, heads turned, not because she didn't belong, but because she radiated. Her deep brown skin shimmered under the golden lights, her tight curls cascading down her back like a velvet curtain, her long cream dress hugging her figure modestly but beautifully. Nicholas rose from his seat with the quiet grace of a man used to commanding rooms. "You look—" He stopped, momentarily breathless. "Incredible." Celeste smiled, a touch shy but grounded. "Thank you. You clean up well yourself." He chuckled and pulled out her chair. Their hands brushed briefly, and she felt a strange warmth crawl up her spine. Not discomfort, but something disarmingly safe. As she settled into her seat, she glanced out the window. The lake reflected the city lights like a glittering promise. Nicholas took his seat again, smoothing his sleeves, then leaned forward, his voice low. "I want to say this clearly, thank you. Not just for helping my son, but for giving him back to me." Celeste's heart softened. "You've raised a beautiful child," she said sincerely. "He just needed someone to listen." Nicholas looked down for a second, jaw tight. When Grayson's mother died, I shut down. I didn't know how to reach him, how to be what he needed. I threw myself into work, therapy, specialists, the best of everything, but nothing worked. Until you. His voice didn't tremble, but something about it felt brittle, as if held together by force. Celeste reached for her water glass, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes the heart doesn't need fixing. It just needs someone to sit with it quietly until it's ready to speak. There was a silence then, but not awkward, thick with unspoken things. Outside, a ferry boat passed slowly, its lights reflecting across the lake's surface. Nicholas lifted his wine glass, tilting it slightly. "To quiet courage," he said. Celeste raised hers, intrigued. "Why that?" He smiled, but there was pain behind it. "Because that's what I see when I look at you. You're not loud, you don't try to impress, but you changed things, you changed him. And maybe you've changed me too." Celeste held his gaze, startled at the sincerity. For a moment she wasn't just a teacher. She wasn't the outsider. She was a woman being seen. The food arrived, salmon over lemon risotto for her, filet mignon for him. But the real course was the conversation. They moved from Grayson's favorite stories to Celeste's childhood in Atlanta, where her grandmother raised her in a small house filled with gospel music and peach cobbler. Nicholas listened closely, nodding, occasionally smiling. "You speak about her like she's still here," he said. "She is," Celeste replied, touching the pendant around her neck. "In everything I do. She taught me to love even when the world didn't love back." Nicholas leaned back, thoughtful. "That's powerful," he murmured. "I wish I'd had someone like that growing up." The cello swelled, echoing through the restaurant like a memory. Celeste let her fingers trail the rim of her glass. "What about your childhood?" she asked gently. Nicholas gave a dry laugh. "Private schools, nannies, perfection. My mother was demanding, cold sometimes. My sister was the only warmth I knew. She passed 10 years ago." Celeste's brows furrowed. "I'm sorry." He waved it off. "Life happens, but sometimes I wonder how much of me froze with her, and how much of that I've passed to Grayson." Celeste's hand, unthinking, reached across the table and touched his. "Not all of you froze," she said. "Look at the way he watches you. There's love there. He just needed the bridge." Nicholas looked at their joined hands as if surprised to find it there, then turned his palm over to hold hers. "And you're that bridge," he said softly. Her throat tightened. The air between them was different now, no longer formality and gratitude, but something deeper, unfamiliar. She pulled her hand away gently, aware of the eyes around them, but her heart didn't retreat. "He's easy to love," she said. "And so are you, when you stop guarding your own heart." Nicholas let out a breathy laugh, but there was awe behind it. "Is that what I'm doing?" She tilted her head. "You tell me." The check came. Nicholas refused to let her even glance at it. As they stepped outside, the night air was cool, the lake breeze gentle against their skin. The valet pulled up his black car, sleek, understated, but Nicholas didn't open the door right away. He turned to her. "Celeste," he said, and something in his tone made her pause. "This dinner, it wasn't just a thank you. I wanted to know you, not the teacher, the woman who changed my son's life, the woman who makes me believe in second chances." She didn't reply at first. Her eyes locked onto his, green meeting brown, two worlds colliding in silence. Then she said quietly, "You know, I don't usually do this. I don't get close, not to parents, not to wealthy men with perfect lives." Nicholas's mouth twitched. "Perfect?" She nodded. "You have the kind of life people envy, and I have the kind of people forget." Nicholas's expression grew serious. "Not me, I see you." His words were simple, but they cracked something open, and that was the moment she knew. This wasn't just dinner. This was something beginning. He opened the door for her. She stepped in, heart racing, unsure of where it would go, but ready. In the back seat there was a folded crayon drawing, Grayson, Miss C, and a house with the sun above it. Celeste smiled, her fingers brushing the paper. Maybe, she thought, some homes aren't places. They're people. And maybe, just maybe, this was the first time she felt she might finally be heading home. The Hale estate stood like a marble fortress in the hills north of Chicago. White columns, wrought iron gates, and hedges trimmed with surgical precision. Celeste had seen homes like this before, on television, in magazines, but never from the passenger seat of a car pulling into the driveway. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers curled tightly around her grandmother's old pendant. Nicholas sat beside her, quiet, jaw tight. "She's complicated," he said at last, as if the words were stones. "Judith wasn't always like this. After my sister passed, something fractured. She never really came back." Celeste nodded, silently, but the knot in her stomach wouldn't ease. She wasn't nervous about wealth. She was nervous about walls, the kind built from grief, tradition, and quiet judgment. Inside, the silence was cathedral-like. The foyer stretched tall with ceilings that vanished into light, a crystal chandelier suspended like a frozen galaxy. Celeste's heels clicked against the polished marble as Nicholas led her through a wide archway and into the parlor. And there she was, Judith Hale, regal, upright in her wheelchair near the window, hair in an immaculate silver chignon, a cream, cashmere shawl draped over her shoulders. Her pale blue eyes locked onto Celeste with the precision of a scalpel. "So," she said, her voice clipped, sharp as ice. "This is the teacher." Celeste smiled warmly, stepping forward. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Hale." She extended her hand. Judith did not take it. Nicholas stepped in quickly. "Mom, this is Celeste Turner. She's the one who's helped Grayson so much these past few months." Judith's lips twitched, not a smile, but something else, tighter. Helped him? Or attached herself to him like a vine? Her gaze drifted down to Celeste's brown, hand resting against her dress. "My grandson needs structure, not sentimentality." The insult landed softly, but it stung. Celeste kept her voice gentle. "Grayson is a wonderful boy. I've only encouraged what was already inside him." Judith turned her head away slightly. "Charming, truly. Nicholas, may I speak to you alone?" Nicholas didn't move. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of her." Judith's eyes narrowed. "Very well," she said coldly. "You've lost your mind, bringing someone like her here." The word she hissed like steam. Celeste didn't flinch. Instead, she walked slowly to the small table beside Judith and placed a glass jar on it, homemade banana pudding still warm. "This was my grandmother's recipe," she said softly. "She made it on hard days. I thought you might like something familiar." Judith stared at the jar as if it were a bomb. "What is that supposed to do? Earn your points?" Celeste shook her head. "No, just kindness." For a moment the room was still. Then Judith muttered, "You should have brought silverware." Celeste smiled faintly. "Already did." She stepped back and sat on the edge of the sofa, keeping a respectful distance. Nicholas stood behind her like a silent shield. "You don't belong in this family," Judith said suddenly, voice low. "You're a phase, a soft place for Nicholas to fall. But soft doesn't last." Celeste met her eyes without blinking. "I'm not soft, Mrs. Hale. I'm steady." Judith blinked just once. Then she turned her chair and wheeled toward the fireplace, ignoring them both. Nicholas exhaled hard. "I'm sorry," he whispered. But Celeste only shook her head. "I've seen worse, and I didn't come here for her approval. I came because Grayson deserves a whole family." Later that evening, Celeste returned alone. Nicholas had gone to tuck Grayson in at home, and Celeste, despite everything, had felt the tug to stay. She carried a tray into the parlor, chicken broth, cornbread, and another jar of pudding. Judith was at the window, a blanket across her knees, staring at the dying sky. "Back again?" she said without turning. "Don't you have papers to grade?" Celeste placed the tray beside her. "I do, but this felt more important." Judith turned her head. "Why?" Celeste took a seat across from her. Because you loved someone once, and you lost her. I know what that does to people. Judith's eyes flicked to hers, sharp but wary. What do you think you know, girl? Celeste's voice didn't rise. I know what it's like to scream and no one hears you. I know what it's like to carry grief so long you forget how to hold anything else. And I know love doesn't knock politely. It just comes in, whether you want it to or not. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock. Judith looked down at the tray. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the spoon. She took a bite of pudding, chewed, swallowed, then another. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't spit it out either. The next morning, Nicholas called Celeste. She didn't sleep, he said. But she asked about your grandmother. Said she made banana pudding too, when my sister was little. Celeste smiled into the phone. It's a start. That weekend, Celeste came again. This time she brought sweet tea and a photo album of her preschool class. Grayson's drawings were in the front. Judith didn't comment, but she turned. Every page, slowly. He's got my son's eyes, she murmured at one point, and his mother's stubborn chin. Celeste nodded. And his magic. Judith didn't reply, but she didn't disagree either. Still, the tension never fully broke. Every visit was a test. Every kindness is a gamble. But Celeste didn't stop. She brought soup when Judith coughed. She brought music when the silence got too loud. And little by little the fortress began to groan, not crumble, not yet, but groan like old wood remembering its shape. Celeste knew the wall was still there, but now there was a crack, a place for light to come in, and sometimes that's all you need. The garden behind the Hale estate was older than the house itself, its stone paths worn smooth by time and rain. In the center stood a massive tree, an ancient oak with a trunk like weathered stone, and branches that stretched across the sky like a cathedral ceiling. Judith hadn't set foot in that garden in over a year. But this afternoon, the spring, sun was warm and the breeze gentle, and Celeste had suggested, gently as always, that a little air might help. Surprisingly, Judith had agreed. Now, as Celeste wheeled her across the grass toward the old oak, silence filled the space between them like an invisible thread, fragile, but holding. Birdsong fluttered from the branches overhead as the wheels crunched softly over gravel. Celeste wore a light cream blouse tucked into high-waisted slacks, her curls pinned up, her hands steady on the chair's handles. Judith, wrapped in a pale shawl, said nothing at first, but when they reached the base of the tree, something shifted. The air felt thicker here, like it held memories. This tree's over 100 years old, Celeste said quietly, circling to face her. I read that it was planted by your husband's grandfather. Judith nodded slowly. He used to sit under it every Sunday morning, back when families still ate together. Celeste knelt beside the chair, plucking a blade of grass and twirling it between her fingers. My grandmother had a magnolia tree in her front yard, she said. She used to say trees remember the people who rest beneath them. They store secrets in their roots. Judith looked down at her lap, her fingers curling inward. Then, this one must know a lifetime of regret. Her voice was brittle, but something in it cracked. Celeste stayed still, letting the wind fill the pause. Judith's eyes glazed as she stared at the thick bark of the tree. I used to bring my daughter here, she whispered. Lie on a blanket, read her stories. She would braid clover into crowns. Celeste didn't move. Her heart beat a little, faster. She had never heard Judith speak of her daughter, not like this. Judith's voice softened to a tremble. Her name was Lillian. She died in a car crash. I never got to say goodbye. A gust of wind swept through the branches, sending a few young leaves dancing to the ground. Judith's hand lifted absently, trying to catch one, but missed. I see her sometimes, she murmured, not looking at Celeste. At night, in dreams, her hair still smells like lavender. I call out, but she never turns back. And then it happened. Judith blinked slowly, her eyes fixed on Celeste's face. Her lips parted. Lillian. The name was a breath, half hope, half grief. Celeste's mouth opened slightly, startled. "Mrs. Hale, I—" But Judith reached for her hand, trembling fingers brushing Celeste's cheek. "You came back," she said, her voice cracking. "My sweet girl, you came back to me." A lump formed in Celeste's throat. She didn't pull away. Instead, she wrapped both hands gently around Judith's frail fingers and whispered, "I missed you too, Mama." The silence that followed was holy. Judith began to weep soft, broken sobs that shook her shoulders. Celeste held her, one arm cradling her back as if she truly were the lost daughter returned. Beneath the shade of that ancient tree, generations of pain were released into the soil. Birds fluttered overhead, time blurred. When Judith finally looked up, her eyes were softer than Celeste had ever seen them. "I'm sorry I was so cold," she said, voice thready. "I didn't know how to grieve without hurting everyone else." Celeste's eyes brimmed, but her voice remained steady. "Grief doesn't follow rules, and love doesn't need permission." That night, the air inside the Hale estate buzzed with something unspoken. Nicholas had returned from the city late, loosened tie, shirt sleeves rolled up. When he stepped into the living room and saw his mother, her face pink from crying but calm, sitting beside Celeste with a cup of tea, he froze. "What did I miss?" he asked. Judith looked up, almost shy. "We went to the garden today," she said. "Celeste showed me the old tree." Nicholas blinked, stunned. Celeste gave him a small, reassuring nod. Grayson came barreling in moments later, a deck of cards in hand. "Miss C, Daddy said we could play Go Fish tonight." For the first time, Judith didn't correct him. She didn't flinch at Miss C or at the way Grayson curled up beside her like it was natural. Instead, she opened her palm and said, "Deal me in, sweetheart." The family gathered around the coffee table, Grayson giggling as he shuffled clumsily, Nicholas's arm around Celeste, and Judith sipping tea with an uncharacteristic softness in her gaze. As laughter spilled through the room and cards flew, like petals across the table, something profound settled into the cracks of the house. Later, after Grayson had fallen asleep mid-game, Celeste stepped out onto the back terrace. The moon was high, the wind rustling the garden beyond. Nicholas joined her quietly, wrapping his arms around her waist. "She thought you were Lillian?" he asked gently. Celeste nodded. For a moment, I think she believed it. Nicholas rested his chin on her shoulder. "And you let her." She turned slightly. She needed something to hold on to. "Maybe I did too." He kissed her temple softly. "You're remarkable, Celeste. You don't force your way in. You simply become the light in the room." She smiled, eyes on the tree in the distance. That's what love does. It doesn't kick down doors. It plants roots and waits. And in that moment, beneath stars and memory, they stood together. Two souls bound by a boy, a tree, and the woman who, against all odds, had cracked a wall wide open. The house behind them was no longer a fortress. It was becoming a home. The morning of the wedding broke with a sky brushed in pale gold, the kind of dawn that whispered promise. In the back garden of the Hale estate, once a place of silence and solitude, a transformation had taken place. Underneath the 100-year-old oak tree, now draped in white orchids and ivory lace, chairs lined the grass in perfect rows. A soft path of rose petals led from the garden gate to the altar, a simple wooden arch Nicholas had carved himself, sanded by hand. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a sanctuary. Only 40 guests, most from Celeste's world, colleagues, childhood, friends, neighbors from her grandmother's old block, filled the seats. On the front row sat Judith, her silver shawl tucked neatly over her shoulders, her expression unreadable as she watched the wind tease the veil hanging from the arch. Inside the estate, Celeste stood before a tall mirror, her breath catching. Her wedding gown was modest, ivory silk, sleeveless with a soft tulle overlay that shimmered as she moved. Her curls had been gathered loosely behind her head, with sprigs of baby's breath woven in like quiet stars. Grayson stood beside her, wearing a tiny navy blue suit with a sunflower pinned to his lapel. "You look like a queen," he whispered. Celeste bent down and kissed his forehead. "I feel like one," she said, voice shaking, "because I have you." In the reflection, Judith appeared in the doorway. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice softer than Celeste had ever heard it. Celeste turned. "Of course." Judith wheeled forward, her eyes shimmering. Lillian would have worn something just like that. The room went still. For a moment, no one breathed. Judith blinked, realizing her slip. "I mean," she began, but Celeste knelt beside her and took her hand. "It's okay," she said gently. "I know you miss her." Judith looked down, her hands trembling. "I judged you too harshly," she whispered. "I let grief make me cruel, but you never stopped showing up." Celeste smiled. "That's what family does, even when it's hard." Judith lifted her chin, her voice barely audible. "Would you mind if I gave you away?" Celeste's eyes widened. "You want to?" Judith nodded, a single tear tracing her cheek. "You brought my son back. You brought me back. It would be my honor." Outside, the guests began to stir. The music, an acoustic version of "Can't Help Falling in Love," gently drifted from the strings of a live trio. Nicholas stood beneath the arch, his sandy blonde hair swept neatly, his suit cut sharp but simple. His eyes scanned the crowd, anxiously. Then he saw it, Judith wheeling Celeste down the aisle. He froze. The guests stood. All he could hear was the beat of his own heart. Celeste walked slowly, her hand resting on the handle of Judith's chair, a graceful balance between tradition and rebirth. Grayson skipped ahead, tossing petals with theatrical flair. "Mama's coming," he giggled. And just like that, tears welled in Nicholas's eyes. When they reached the front, Judith lifted Celeste's hand and placed it in Nicholas's. "Take care of each other," she said. "Don't let the world tell you what you are. You already know." Then she wheeled back to her seat, shoulders trembling but proud. Nicholas cupped Celeste's hands. "You're radiant," he whispered. "You're my home," she whispered back. The officiant smiled warmly, giving a nod. The ceremony began. Words about love, resilience, and second chances filled the garden. When it came time for vows, Nicholas spoke first. "Celeste," he began, voice rough, "you didn't just teach my son how to speak. You taught me how to feel again. You showed me what strength looks like, in a soft voice, in a patient heart. I vow to protect your light, to build a life worthy of your grace." Celeste's hands trembled as she lifted her gaze. "Nicholas," she said, "you saw me when others refused to look. You made room for my love, for my voice, for my roots. I vow to walk beside you, not behind you. I vow to raise Grayson with joy and truth. And I vow to never stop choosing us no matter what storms may come." The rings were exchanged, simple gold bands that caught the afternoon sun. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Nicholas pulled Celeste into his arms, and their kiss was more than a ceremony. It was released. It was healing. The guests erupted in applause, Grayson racing to them, arms wide, yelling, "We're a family now." The reception was held right there in the garden. Fairy lights twinkled from the oak branches and laughter spilled like champagne. Judith sat at the head table, sipping cider, her eyes following Celeste with something that might finally be called affection. She watched her dance with Grayson, then Nicholas. She watched her laugh with friends who adored her. And when the cake was cut, vanilla with peach filling in honor of Celeste's Georgia roots, Judith took a second slice. "Best cake I've had in years," she murmured. "It tastes like home." No one dared correct her. The moment was too sacred. As the night wound down, Nicholas and Celeste stood beneath the tree, hands entwined, the moonlight casting silver across their skin. "Do you think she accepts me?" Celeste asked. Nicholas looked toward the house. Judith sat asleep. Now Grayson curled beside her on the patio chair. "I think," he said slowly, that she accepts love, and right now you are its fiercest form. Celeste leaned into his shoulder. It still feels like a dream. Nicholas kissed the top of her head. Then let's not wake up. The guests departed slowly, reluctant to leave a night so full of hope. Grayson stirred, sleepy but smiling, whispering, "Mama was the prettiest." Celeste carried him inside, past the fireplace where Judith's photo of Lillian now rested next, to one of her Nicholas and Grayson, a new frame, a new family, and under that 100-year-old tree, roots entwined with memory and grace, their legacy had begun. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey beneath the 100-year-old tree, a story of healing, courage, and love that defies the walls we build around our hearts. What part of Celeste and Nicholas's story touched you the most? Was it Judith's transformation, Grayson's quiet smile, or the wedding rooted in grace? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances and the power of love. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. Until next time, take care, keep your heart open, and we'll see you in the next story.